Hi, my name's Robbie Jones. I was diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy and heart failure in June 2018. It was the first time really I'd been ill in anything. So from that point of view, it was quite a shock. There was no familial history. And I guess just the surprise initially of being told that I had heart failure essentially, was something that took me very much by surprise. Yeah, I'd been very fit and active. I was been a PE teacher for over 30 years and played rugby to a reasonably high level. Been very active with I'd done a couple of marathons and half marathons, the Great North Runs, that sort of thing. And all of a sudden just been sniped by this condition essentially. So life has gone at a different tangent for the last 3+ years. I think it's just being able to deal with and cope with different situations. I think about my teaching job every day was a challenge in the fact that something different would happen and be sprung upon you and had to react, whether it was going off for a fixture and certain pupils not being available last minute or whatever, and just having to continually adapt to those things. And I suppose on the sports field, finding things not always easy and having to deal with that situation and work out strategies there to cope with what you're actually facing. And I think that I have been quite thick-skinned in terms of how I deal with things, and that's not always a good thing. But I recognise that I feel that I can deal with different situations, I guess, because of the experiences I've had in the past. I think that nature nurture concept is, that yes, there's obviously it sounds a bit psychological, but there is a lot of social learning from different people and seeing how people get by. But I suppose not something that I was aware of at the time, but my dad was told in his early 30s that he had 4 months to live. And he lasted another 55 years or so. So from that point of view, I guess there's there is an element of the nature side in there, and but his mechanism of coping with things was very much to shut up shop and not say anything to anybody. Whereas I guess mine's been a bit more open and being willing to talk about my situation, particularly over the last 3 years. That I've had no qualms in being quite open about the situation I find myself in. It's not something I obviously brag about, but if I'm asked the question, I've got no issues in answering it appropriately. So certainly the view of myself, that value of worth, disappeared, I suppose, and you do feel, or I felt more vulnerable. And obviously being as I say, never having been ill before, then all of a sudden having to deal with this situation. So yes, that aspect of things definitely changed, and I suppose being more guarded in terms of wanting to suddenly run outside or run up the stairs and realizing that that's probably not a good idea and that sort of thing. But then on the other hand, I was somebody that was prepared to to go through all the cardiac rehab sessions, and which added to the frustrations, but nonetheless were extremely worthwhile in terms of giving me the confidence to move forward. To yes, I can do some exercise, and yes, I can try and continue in that vein. I guess it's me having to come to terms with that side of things and having to deal with that process of no longer being in work full time. And I think that because, as I mentioned, it's my involvement in schools rugby at county and national level, I've got those things to keep me interested in. And similarly, I'd started some involvement with, as I mentioned, with some students at UCLAM in Preston, which was with a group called Commensus, which is a community and service users group of volunteers. And I find that process extremely cathartic, of actually talking about my my situation, although not every involvement is about me, but I suppose it's me using my skills that I have in that situation. The fact that I know my condition is stable due to my medication, so I suppose that's a relief, and the fact that I'm going out and I'm walking every day, and I'm making sure that I do that. And I've set myself little goals. I've said that I want to walk 100 miles a month, which is only 3 miles a day. So in that context, it's not too bad a task, but ultimately, I've made sure that, and I keep a tab on in terms of how far I walk sort of each day, and I sort of clock it on my watch and that sort of thing. And I do that rather than the steps. And yes, I'll look at sort of what the heart rate's doing. Yes, I'll take my my blood pressure every sort of second, third day, something like that. But I suppose taking the tablets every morning and night is a reminder that you're having to do this. And you're having to do this for the rest of your life. So I think from that point of view, whilst on the one hand it's positive that you're taking them and they're helping you and helping me, but on the other hand, for me that's a constant reminder that I have this condition and that I'm not as well as I used to be, and that side of things. So I guess that's one issue. But I guess the other aspect is really just the fact that I'll do what I can do, and I will want to do what I can do. And I think that from a point of view of trying to make sure that I fill my day and I do have some worth, that they're really sort of important for me. And I guess it sort of got to the stage of making sure that you live every day, and you don't sort of just regret not doing something. And if the opportunity is there to do something, get out and do, really. And that's certainly something that I guess has always been there to a certain extent. And I mentioned my father's situation before. Sort of all my friends at school used to joke, sort of, how come your dad's always there watching you play your rugby and your brother and whatever. And I guess sort of from his situation, having sort of been given a sort of diagnosis of cancer at the age he wasn't going to miss an opportunity either. And I think that's sort of, when I sort of picked up on that, I guess that's certainly something that sort of resonates with me, really, in terms of, don't miss that opportunity to do something. Live life and enjoy life whilst you can, and whilst you're here to do it. Despite sort of not being the expert, I think that because of our situation, we go out and we find that information, so we almost become an expert by experience, I think, and we shouldn't shy away from that either. It sort of, because it's a lived experience, it's not wrong, I guess, and therefore, you can't be told by somebody, well, that doesn't actually happen. Well, I'm sorry, but it does, and that's the effect it has on me. And I think those sorts of skills, qualities are vital. My coping mechanism really has been to talk about it, and I think I appreciate that there'll be some people that don't want to talk about the condition and feel that sort of they just want to sort of to not for people not to know, whether that's for work or whatever sort of situations. And I understand that fully. But for me, it's been talking about it, and that's helped. And I think that it's helped me sort of process the fact that that's the reason why I'm at home. So somebody came around to do some plumbing, whatever, the other day, and so, or you had to take the day off, and is that sort of situation, you're almost sort of not wanting to make excuses for yourself, that the fact that that's why you're here. And I think that's, for me, that's been really quite significant. And as I mentioned earlier, I think that talking about it, I find quite cathartic. And I think that people who don't know about the condition, the more people that do know about the condition, the better. My ability to cope with different has sort of led, or has arisen through frustrations, probably more than anything, of not being able to do things. and I think that I found that sort of situation quite difficult in terms of how to deal with certain things. But then I've sort of tried to turn that on its head, I suppose, and as I say, sort of to use my experiences as something positive moving forward. So if it is helping me, it's helping somebody else, and so on. And in terms of, I guess that one of the best things I've done, which I'd never thought I would do, and I suppose it's the COVID related side of things, is the coffee and chat, the Cardiomyopathy UK coffee and chat on a Friday afternoon. Yes, I've used social media, but I would never sort of think that I would be somebody that would have joined that sort of group. But it's been fantastic, and just the fact that we're quite an eclectic sort of group of people that are on there, but everybody has something in common, and therefore, whilst we can talk about everything and anything, there are times where it comes back to cardiomyopathy and the treatment or the care that each of us have received, or whether it's new people coming in. So I would certainly suggest that to people, that if there's an opportunity to talk to people, to do so, and through that coffee and chat, which is quite an informal, it's extremely informal process. And similarly, the forums specific to the various conditions that are set up sort of by the charity as well. I'd certainly advocate people use those just as a sounding board, if nothing else. In the small group that I was in, which was effectively like a church hall, but we had a physio, a heart failure nurse, an OT, and another nurse practitioner or something there. And it was almost a one-to-one session initially, and there was one lady who was there who said, this is a waste of time, I don't need to be here, and I'll walk my dog at home, and that sort of thing. And I just said to her after one of the sessions, stick with it. I said, it's an information gaining process as well. Do stick with that process, and you'll gain some worth out of it. And to her credit, she sort of came back to me sort of 3 weeks later and sort of thanked me for saying that, and sort of actually opened up a bit more about that process. And you're right, that I'm sure the uptake isn't necessarily there, and I think people think that they can do it on their own, but it's it was actually the nurse. It was the heart failure nurse at one of those sessions that I think she had just been to the cardiomyopathy conference when it was at Liverpool, which is obviously sort of closest for me up in the northwest. And she said, "Oh, it's a shame that you weren't there." And I said, "Oh," and she sort of pushed me sort of in the direction of Cardiomyopathy UK, and eternally grateful really for her sort of little nudge and the support, because the hospital app per se didn't sort of, there wasn't that information there, and which I suppose is one reason why I've sort of pursued the opportunity to become a change maker in that same context, really, because that needs to happen, and increasing that awareness needs to happen. So I suppose that when those extra little bits have sort of been thrown in, I suppose I've just become more matter of fact about it, and therefore, obviously hopeful that Dr. Google's sort of initial bit isn't correct, and in another 2 years I'm not turning left or right. I'm sort of controlling the controllables, I suppose, and sort of I'm doing my bit in terms of limiting salt in my diet. I'm sort of, yes, I'll have a drink, but I certainly haven't been drunk for sort of over 3 years, and that sort of thing. And ironically, the last time I was at a lifelong pal's funeral, who just collapsed and died, and which was literally sort of 7 weeks before I was diagnosed. So, from that point of view, I suppose that sort of that last time of having a drink was at least celebrating sort of the life of my pal. But that's something that I'm mindful of. when I first came out of hospital, I didn't have a drink at all for sort of the first 5 or 6 months, and I'd sort of made that my point, and and then there's people who said, oh, yes, you can have a drink of alcohol, but sort of making sure it's sort of, so I might have, I don't know, a glass of wine a night, or if that, it would probably every other night really. And so I'm sort of, very mindful of that side of things. So as I say, I suppose I'm doing the bits that I can control, and sort of taking medication every day, and doing my exercise. Yes, I could probably do more stretching and so on, but at least I'm sort of doing what's been specifically sort of asked of me in that context. As I did when I first as soon as I came out of hospital, and that was one of the things that the school management, when I was on my phased return, said, well, you've been on a phased return since September, and this was initially Christmas, and then that was extended through to the May. And I said, well, I'm just doing exactly what I've been told to do, and I've made sure I've done that, and I suppose that's that was very much in my interest to make sure that was the case. And I suppose that by doing that has helped me sort of process and deal with what I can control.